Hickey, or Dr. H, as many of my students refer to me. I want to welcome you to another episode of the International Service Learning Experiential Medical Education Podcast. During each episode, I will be interviewing healthcare-focused students and faculty from high school to university that have had an opportunity to participate in an international service learning trip. Additionally, I will be discussing the benefits and challenges to international service with healthcare professionals that have served abroad, as well as industry leaders in healthcare, education, study abroad, spirituality, and those living in the countries being served. Today, I am very excited to have Dr. Katie Lucas as my guest. I've had the privilege of having Katie as a former student, and I'm very eager for her to share with us her journey in healthcare. Katie graduated in 2014 from the University of South Carolina with a Bachelor of Science degree in biology and a minor in international studies. 2019 with her MD degree from the USC School of Medicine in Greenville, South Carolina. In 2023, she finished her residency in obstetrics and gynecology at George Washington University Hospital in Washington, D.C. Katie has gone on multiple trips with International Service Learning, initially as a student and then as a student leader, where she co-taught an International Service Learning course. Katie is now in private practice, where she specializes in OBGYN care and women's health. Hey, Katie, it's Dr. H. It's been way too long. Just to let everybody know, Katie was a former student, but now she's all grown up and she's a physician and she's in a practice. And I'm so excited to be able to reconnect with her because it's been such a long time. And I have the most precious position, I believe, in life, in that in addition to being a nurse, one of the best things in my life was being principal of a program called Capstone Scholars. And in that program, I was able to really connect with my students to the point where we kind of changed the faculty-student relationship to friend. And that was important. And that friend relationship came from working side by side in clinics in underserved populations. And very few faculty have that opportunity. So Katie and I worked together in a rural setting many, many, many years ago. And we haven't seen each other since her graduation. So Katie, just let us know a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and what you're doing right now.
Sure. So I'm Katie Lucas. I was born and raised in Northern Virginia and made my way down to South Carolina. And that was the best decision I still stand by I ever made. I loved my time at USC and being part of the Capstone Scholars Program. And it was so formative at a time that was the most formative for most people. So I decided wanted to pursue medicine as an undergraduate student. And Dr. H and ISL had a huge role in how I proceeded in that journey. I did get accepted to medical school at South Carolina School of Medicine, went to Greenville, which is the second campus for South Carolina School of Medicine, and Greenville was amazing. I had an amazing education there, loved my time there. I decided I wanted to be an OBGYN, and I love working in women's healthcare. I love working with amazingly smart, talented people and a lot of women. And then when I was applying for residency, decided I wanted to head back home. So I did my residency training at George Washington University in DC. And now I am a private practice OBGYN in Richmond, which is about an hour and a half south of DC.
Wow. Katie, how long ago was it that we did our service learning trip?
The first one was Belize, and that was the first for, I think, both of us. And that was in 2012. So I was a sophomore as a college student. And then I did a second trip with you to Nicaragua. And that was the first one that I helped be a co-leader for as a student.
Wow. Talk about a trip down memory lane. That's great. I want to go back to your OBGYN decision process. So many students kind of sort of think they know what they want to do in their undergrad, but I always tease them and say you're kind of like a kid in a candy store. You go through your pediatric rotation, you like this. You go through your orthopedic rotation, you like that. How do you finally come up with that decision? Because you went through all your rotations in med school. How did you finally decide on OBGYN, just out of curiosity?
There was multiple factors in that decision, and it's kind of like, you think about finding the best fit for you in terms of your goals, and you mentioned about quality of life and technical challenge and diversity of, the clinical medicine side of it. OBGYN for me was a combination of, I loved the variety of what I did, and I still do. I mean, I can be in the operating room one day to delivering, the second day to being in the office. And I have this longitudinal relationship with women during the entirety of their life. And that was something that I found so fulfilling as a resident, as a medical student, and as an attending now. I mean, it's something that I enjoy every year, seeing people come back, seeing what's new in their lives. So I don't think that's not unique to OBGYN, but it's definitely something that I cherish the most. And not to mention the fact that I just work with a lot of amazingly talented, just smart women. And I think that was a huge influence to me. All the attendings at the hospital in Greenville were just like gods to us. I mean, they were competent, and they were smart, and they were kind and strong. And it's just, when I worked with a lot of them, I was like, wow, this is what I want to be.
Isn't it amazing when you work with such a collaborative team where everybody works together toward a common goal and everybody is working together to set each other up? What a wonderful opportunity to find that niche. Now, what was your decision for med school? I know you went on the trips with me, and I believe you were pre-med at the time as your own kind of pre-med designation. Where did you get the idea that you wanted to go to med school, number one? And then how did you decide on going on a service learning medical mission trip, number two?
Well, I think I always had in the back of my mind, I was interested in getting into the medical field. And I had actually, through capstone, through another service learning class at USC, I was taking a women's studies class at the time. We were doing service learning as part of the curriculum. So I actually got involved with the Columbia Free Clinic before I even knew about the Belize trips. That was early on that year. And I was like, okay, I think this is something I want to do. And I, kind of was like, I think I would like to be a doctor. There's so many amazing healthcare related careers out there, as you know. But I was like, I think I want to be a doctor. It just seems to be what I was called to do.
Hmm.
And so when you brought up the ISL trip to Belize, and I was like, well, this is kind of an amazing collaboration of all my interests. I mean, I was an international studies minor. I had interest in travel. I enjoyed languages, and I had this kind of passion for Central and South America. And I just thought it was a great opportunity to explore all of these arrays of interests. So it was definitely a no-brainer. And I was, again, one of probably the most formative experiences of my nascent career at the time.
Is there anything that you can recall? I know it was many, many years ago, but is there anything that you can recall during that experience, either in Belize or Nicaragua, that stands out?
I mean, I think it's all with me, I almost every single day. A little bit about what my practice is like now and kind of how I came through residency. George Washington, we staff essentially a free clinic that's, sponsored by one of the healthcare systems in Maryland. And it's pretty much 99%, Hispanic people who speak Spanish. And, that was my residency. And that the experience in Belize and Nicaragua was very much formative for my decision to go to GW because of that component to our experience as residents. So I'm running a clinic and all my patients speak Spanish, and you're learning the language. You kind of have to. I mean, we take care of them inpatient as well. So you kind of have to learn as quickly as you can. And that was such a rewarding part of my residency experience. And it's because I felt it was a rewarding part of my ISL experience. And then now as an attending, I'd say probably a good 25% of my patients that I see now speak Spanish. And it's a clinic that I'm honing and growing and very enthusiastic about. But, I think, when I think about the Belize trip especially, is Belize had less infrastructure than Nicaragua did, and I just remember I think the day before our first clinic site, it had rained a good bit the week before, and our driver was mentioning how there's a chance that we can't get to the clinic site because the roads get washed out. And when you get to these clinic sites, I remember open walled stalls that we were taking people's blood pressure, and you're simultaneously learning how to hone these skills as a pre-med student, and that's challenging, and it's exhilarating all in itself. And then you're doing it in a different country, and you're doing it in a different language, and there was so many layers of reward challenge balancing during that trip. I think when you come away from it and you're like, wow, this is incredible. And it was very much confirming that, okay, this is what I want to do. And I kind of held on to that the last 13 years since I've gone through my career. And I kind of take some of those feelings now. I mean, I think my most favorite part of my practice now is helping those who are underserved. And I volunteer on behalf of my practice at a free clinic in the community now, even so, because I just felt like that was what I loved about my job and still love about my job.
That's fantastic that you had that foundation in Belize and in Nicaragua, and that you're working in clinics where a good number of they have limited English proficiency. One thing I did, Katie, with my doctoral research, I looked at the triadic relationship, the interpreter process. And I'm actually working with a student right now, former student, Aubrey. She's working on her DNP, and she's extending my research, and she's developing a module for international service learning that will help every future student to learn more about the interpreter process. I'm sure you've been exposed to the interpreter process. Have you seen challenges yourself with what we call the triadic relationship, the provider, the patient, and the provider, the patient, and the interpreter?
Yeah, I mean, I think in this digital age, particularly, you have folks who are remote. And I'll say, as an OBGYN, you're in a lot of sensitive situations where when I was going through residency and learning how to speak Spanish so much more than I was before, it's almost a necessity. If you are going to be in a situation that could be sensitive, and we're talking about women in vulnerable positions or women who have socioeconomic vulnerabilities, like when you speak their language, that you will see the difference in their relationship with you. And I've had patients, say, thank you so much, or have this kind of look on their face when I walk in the room and I start speaking to them in their language. It's the reason why I do it, because it's giving someone the comfort to know that you care enough to speak to them in their language, that they're going to be able to talk with you so much better than through an interpreter. And again, in cases of sensitive or emergent situations, having someone who's speaking to you in their language makes a huge difference when it comes to patient, provider rapport. And I'll actually have patients be like, yeah, don't call that interpreter again. That was not a very good interpreter. So they'll actually tell you some feedback about whether or not they think they're
But
good.
if you don't have a proficiency in Spanish, I mean, you are reliant then on an interpreter, and you've had those experiences before yourself, I'm sure.
Yeah, and I think it's about, you were excellent about helping us through how to interact appropriately, with an interpreter. And that's a skill I took with me from med school residency and beyond. And I have patients who speak other languages as well and still rely on interpreter services. But, remembering to address the patient and not the
Correct.
interpreter is a huge one.
Correct.
I think that, that was like probably day one of orientation of how to interact with a patient not speaking their language when you're using interpreter service. Is you're still going to make eye contact, you're still going to have the same rapport, you're going to address them instead of saying her or he or them or something. You're going to address the person in front of you instead of the
Now,
interpreter.
remind me, what is your Spanish proficiency?
I would say I'm on my way to being
Oh,
fluent. I am definitely above just medical these days. I do regular lessons. During residency, I was my next door neighbor. She's actually was a labor and delivery nurse in Spain. And she and I became really good friends. And she was tutoring me for a while. And I told her, I really would like to just move past what I can do medically into conversational. So I will say at this point, I am more than medical and hopefully going to be fluent in the next maybe a couple
oh,
months to a
wow,
year.
excellent. Well, good. Do you recommend also then, Katie, that students going into healthcare, if they have the opportunity to try to take another language, and if they did, would you recommend Spanish?
I mean, I think just as being a human, if you have interest in language, that's going to broaden your horizons as not only being an effective provider, but also just a competitive person to hire. I mean, everyone wants
Mhm.
somebody who has that skill set, but I think when Spanish is a very commonplace language now, especially regionally. So it depends on where you live. But I mean, I think if you learn Spanish, you're never going to regret it. It's going to help you with your patients and just the diversity of what you see. I mean, it's very strong word of mouth in Hispanic communities where, I'll be seeing somebody and they'll say, well, my cousin's coming to see you next week, or my sister, or my mother, or my brother, my brother, somebody in their family. And you'll find that, if you broadcast or you offer that kind of service to somebody, that there'll be more people too, and you'll have the opportunity to practice. I mean, I go to work every day, and every Spanish speaking patient I have, it's kind of almost like an excitement. It's a little
Mhm.
rush to my day where I'm practicing my
Mhm.
language skills. And it could be that I did a lesson last night on irregular verbs or, directive things or whatever. And I'm like, okay, well, I have a couple new vocab words. And sometimes I share that. And they'll ask me, oh, where did you learn Spanish? And I'm like, well, I learned throughout the course of my career, but right now I'm taking classes and I'll show them my app and they get a kind of a kick out of it.
Now,
So
do you see that within your colleagues, within your peers? Do you see a good number of them also attempting to learn Spanish or being bilingual?
I would say no. There's I think two providers in our entire organization, maybe three, well, I guess say three, who do speak a good amount of proficient, at least medical Spanish, if not conversational. And some of them, it's mostly because they've had similar stories to mine where they've done international travel or, maybe their residency program had a high prevalency of Spanish speaking patients, but not a ton. But I also, when you get into the private practice world, it's a little different. If you're an academic center, your payers are a lot of, Medicaid patients, and they tend to be folks who are underserved or uninsured, and you're having more diversity of languages. So I'd say some academic centers, most people, have some sort of Spanish skills or have been exposed to some sort of Spanish, interactions. But kind of in the private practice world regionally, it just really depends.
Katie, when I've traveled on these trips, I'm every time I come home, I'm humbled. You went on two trips. You went to Belize and Nicaragua. You saw the same poverty. You saw the same underserved populations. I mean, we both served those populations when we were there. How did that affect you? Do you remember? I know it was years ago, but do you remember at all when you came back what your feelings were? I know a lot of students who shared with me that they afterwards, maybe weeks afterwards, they felt a little depressed that they made a great connection with a patient or a family, and now they felt bad that 2 weeks later the medicine that we had dispersed, the dressings we had applied to the wound, or whatever the case, was already passed, and they wondered, did our efforts really make a difference?
Yeah, I think that's exactly correct. I mean, I think I remember there was a patient who came up the very last day, and we were packing up, and they had diabetes, hadn't tested their blood sugar, and for quite some time, and were feeling very sick. And we were able to give them a little bit of insulin. And same thing goes for any medication we gave. It's like almost a countdown in the back of your mind of, I know exactly how many doses they have left. And that was definitely unsettling when you come back. It just seems like you're exposed to this incredibly formative experience, and you made an impact on someone's life, maybe possibly for the first time in your own life, that you kind of were in that role for somebody else, and you just kind of have this movie reel going in the back of your head of what's happening there now. And it's definitely was upsetting to me, and I know a lot of other people shared the same sentiment. And I remember, and I think this probably is true to this day. I remember coming back and like probably going to Bilo or the grocery store or whatever, and just being really unsettled by the excess that we have here in this country. And, blessed and grateful that I am for the resources to be able to do that when I know so many people don't. But it was hard to stomach that we were around so many wonderful people who had so little and gave so much of themselves. And, we come back and there's everything we could possibly have. And I just think I took away from it, like how grateful I am for my life and how things are for me in this country. But, at the same time, I wanted to go back. I just remember feeling like everything there is in like Technicolor. And you come back here and it's like black and white TV. It was not comparable.
I love that comparison. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
It's so, so many people, myself included, share that same feeling. But be reassured that I think the best gift that we gave them was empowering them to help themselves. I mean, in addition to the Band-Aids and the medications and the treatments, along the way, we did take the time to educate them, whether it was a diabetic patient, about their nutrition or other things. So rest assured that some of the things we did were long lasting. It is a culture shock coming back, and you shared that they give so much and they have so little, and that is amazing. You're a perfect example, Katie, of that seed that I unintentionally tried to plant with a lot of my students of paying it forward. I mean, you had this wonderful experience. It was humbling. It maybe kind of sort of contributed to the path that you're on right now, but look at what you're doing right now. OBGYN, you're serving an underserved population. You're practicing a language that's not comfortable to yourself, which in this case is Spanish, and you're a champion for the patients. And as you shared, the patients really appreciate that. And in my not the best Spanish, I try as best I can to make that connection, make the eye contact as we learn down there, and even reach out and I always place a hand on a shoulder or on an arm just as comforting measure, like how are you doing today, kind of thing. And that's important because I think as you practice that in your daily practice, you may have students shadowing you, or you may have other residents working and coming through your practice. They get to see the way that you're conducting yourself, and then they pick up some of those good things from you also, which is huge.
Yeah, and it's what I love. I mean, you're right. It was a seed that was planted a long time ago that I've taken the time to kind of nurture and really optimize, the direction I want to go in to continue to be in this role, in my community and serving underserved populations, and something I hope to continue as I move forward through my career. I mean, I'm still a fairly new attending, so there's a good amount of call days and working and all that stuff. But, I've always wanted to get back to doing international service. So it's something that I would like to, it's in the works maybe in the next couple of years. I've just been kind of focused on getting my practice running and feet wet. And as an attending, it's a big uphill swing. But, as I'm getting more comfortable, I like to start working on finding some of those other opportunities again.
Well, know that I'd be hoping to work with you in the future if you're one of those few physicians that shut down your office and say, hey, staff, let's all go down to Belize or Guatemala or somewhere to do a week of healthcare. Because right now we're working with a fourth-year med student at USC who's leading a cohort of fourth-year med students and gap year students to Belize to do healthcare. And it was a student that's leading this trip. Her name is Gabby. She went on 2 of my service learning trips. So again, that seed I planted, hopefully that doesn't go away. And there are so many opportunities to extend ourselves to do that. Katie, what would you share for students that are, number one, trying to decide on their future path in healthcare? As I shared with you before we went live, I've been doing a lot of mentoring and a lot of presentations trying to help students to figure out their path in life. So how would you recommend that they do figure out their path in life, whether it's physician, nurse, PA, or whatever? And then number 2, what would you recommend, or would you recommend those same students do what you did, go on a service learning trip?
Yeah, I mean, I think my overwhelming, advice, and it was always kind of the advice given to me, is go get your hands dirty. Go get some experience, working in a free clinic or volunteering at the hospital. Just putting yourself in an environment where you can imagine your day to day, I think, is important. This is a long commitment. It's a very rewarding but very long commitment that you're making, and that goes for nursing, that goes for pharmacy, that goes for PAs, MPs, anybody who wants to get into healthcare. And we've seen so many changes to the world of healthcare, even in the last 5 years. You're right, dating myself, as I feel like I'm a different generation now, even. But, I think for me, it was always getting my hands dirty. And I love that about the ISL trips, because yes, you're learning a set of skills. We did orientations, we did lessons on how to suture, like all these technical things, but you're just learning how to be in this space. And the space itself can be very intimidating, and it can be, really make you feel vulnerable, but that's kind of the beauty of it. You're learning how to build yourself up and be there for other people. But my entire career has always been about getting my hands dirty.
I appreciate that. I wrote down a few notes here. Get your hands dirty. I love that, and learn how to be in the space. You're so right. I mean, you can't just go to class and get good grades. You've got to get out there. And I always say, take the blinders off and get involved, and to be there for other people. You need to be assertive and push yourself and basically get out of your comfort zone. As you know, from the Capstone Scholars Program that we were both involved in, I developed the Personal Challenge Program, which is very similar to what you've just said. My Personal Challenge Program came from my fear of heights. And despite my fear of heights, I went on to climb the 7 highest mountains on the 7 continents of the world. I'm a pilot, a skydiver, and I'm not ashamed to say at the age of 70 that I've cried on every mountain around the world, and my palms are sweaty, my heart is racing every time I go flying, but I still do it. But I get outside my comfort zone. But you're so right. I mean, get your hands dirty, get out there and do it, and because I think the more you do in what you've done, the more well-rounded you are. And the more well-rounded you are, the more opportunities you can present to your patient and to the patient's family. So kudos to you for what you've done, and I'm really proud of you for championing women's healthcare issues. We need more women's healthcare advocates. I've always been one all my life, being a male in a female-dominated profession. I've always been very sensitive to the needs of my female patients, and I'm really excited to see more and more young women in healthcare taking up that cause. And I think I've shared with you that I'm working with a group of young ladies now at the University of South Carolina. It's called Women in Healthcare. And what we're doing for this group, it's all women, and they're all looking at different facets of roles in healthcare. But they're going to be going to Belize in March, and it's going to be an all-women clinic. And I'm really, really, really super excited that they want to do this, because we're going to have all female physicians, all female interpreters. And the whole purpose of this female opportunity is to bring ladies from the community into our clinics that normally would not come because they feel a little intimidated by the male physicians that are there. These ladies that suffer in silence, these ladies that have pain, these ladies that are caring for their families and pushing off their own pain. Heaven forbid they may have breast lumps. Heaven forbid they may have gynecological issues. But here we have a wonderful opportunity to serve these ladies in the community, to do so much for their families and don't normally ask for help, but are in need of assistance. So I'm excited to see that there are young women out there now that want to champion the cause.
I think you're going to give all of those, female students an amazing experience to be exposed to that culture, because you will find that you're absolutely right. A lot of women are not able to actually seek the care that they need, or culturally they kind of suffer in silence, as you said, just because that's kind of what happens, and I remember, every single time I talk to a patient about, you don't have to be in pain, you don't have to suffer with this, we can do something for you, we can help you, and it just never occurs to them that that's an option. And so, you get to, again, be in that space with a woman is humbling, and it's special just because you know that you get to have a unique relationship with that individual. And I think doing an all female group is not only awesome just for what it is, but you're gonna find that you're gonna be able to reach so many more people because of that comfort that you can provide them.
Well, we're truly excited by that opportunity, and hopefully, once we promote that opportunity, we'll see more and more female physicians like yourself, taking advantage of those same opportunities, because there is a great need, and there's a great underserved population out there. Being a male in a female-dominated profession, I see, and I share this with my students many times, that patients have rights, and many times I've been told by a female patient, I would rather have a female nurse taking care of me. And I'm perfectly fine with that. But I do share with my students, they need to know this, that patients have rights. Have you seen any challenges yourself in the clinical setting with the care providers being male or female? I mean, in your case, you're female, obviously, and you're OBGYN. Have you seen any issues or concerns with females not wanting male physicians, for example?
I work with a lot of really wonderful, kind male partners, and I think it's just a direction that women are preferring women providers. And, I have a couple of friends who are male OBGYNs. Definitely, there's some intrinsic challenge there with that kind of just interaction. Again, you're in a sensitive space, you're in a vulnerable space with a woman who's delivering her, examinations or whatever, and always having a chaperone. I always have a chaperone myself too, but you always want to make sure you have a chaperone. But I do get a good amount of patients who, are new patients to our practice, and they say that they prefer to have a woman, or they have history of trauma. So a lot of women have history of trauma, and a lot of us don't ask. So that's a big part of what I do, is making sure I'm screening women for history of trauma, because trauma can happen in any setting. It can be also perpetrated by a female. Right. And you're in this scenario where a woman is in a vulnerable space, and you always want to make sure that you're asking.
One of my people that I interviewed for a podcast, Maddie, actually shared that her interaction in, I believe it was in Guatemala, was with a patient who had had marital abuse. And she was able to be there for the patient, even though there was a language barrier. I believe she tried to speak as best Spanish she could. And I believe she actually taught her some yoga relaxation moves to put the person in a better place. And I believe she shared that no one had helped her to that effect before, that no one had ever extended themselves to do what they had done. But the little thing that Maddie had done put this patient in a much better place, because the patient had been traumatized. And even now, Maddie had shared that she wished she could have done more, but she did do something, which was fantastic. And what you shared is that consciously you have to be aware that there could be some trauma in almost every patient that you see.
Yeah, and I think even just learning the few phrases. I mean, I think about the aspects of a physical examination in my office are very specific, obviously, and even learning a few phrases of how to ask permission for the next step of the exam. I think that's the very least that we can do for a female patient who doesn't speak your language, and that goes for any language.
And then when you're in those sensitive situations, you also have an interpreter there too. So that could, depending, I mean, in your case, you may not need one, but there is potential that you could have a very sensitive situation and also have an interpreter there, which could make the patient feel uncomfortable because there is a third person.
Yeah, and sometimes that interpreter is a male. So that still goes along, and they're not going to maybe disclose as much if there's an interpreter involved or someone that they don't feel comfortable being in the room. So, a lot of times the patients will bring somebody who speaks English a little bit more proficiently than they may. And, that's always kind of a slippery slope too. It's obviously they're not a medical interpreter. So, I always want to make sure that, especially when you're explaining treatment plans or diagnoses, that you're using the correct avenues
Correct.
for communicating with the patients. But sometimes those folks are just there also just for moral support.
Yep.
So, especially if you speak Spanish and you don't need their language, you don't need them helping to interpret what you're saying, I still offer them to stay. I mean, especially women who in the United States for very long, there's a lot going on in the world and the country that whatever makes women feel comfortable in my office, I'm going to be an advocate for.
Good. Good for you. Well, Katie, I really appreciate your time today. I hope I didn't take you too much out of your comfort zone as we talked about your experience. What a formative experience that you had on our service learning trips. But I've heard a lot of students share how much of an influence I was on their trip. But know that I became a much better person because of interacting with people like yourself and others. It's a two-way street. I mean, you picked up something from me, but I picked up on the passion that all of you students had. And that's kind of the genesis for why I'm doing this podcast. I've heard this passion for years. And you can look at an Instagram reel and you can look at a picture and you can see someone hugging a little child and it looks so beautiful. But you can't get the sense of the feeling like what we have shared, by talking passionately about these experiences. And I see the great value of students going on these service learning trips. Many students that are pre-med have shared with me that it always came up in their pre-med interviews when they went to the committee for their interview. And so many students are struggling, how am I going to stand out? How are they going to pick me over everybody else? But almost every one of my pre-med kids to a T that's had their interview has shared, well, tell me about this medical mission trip you won. In your case, two of them, and one of them you were a leader. I mean, do you recall way back when, did that ever come up in your conversation?
Oh, yeah. And I think that was a great avenue to explore with a prospective interviewer about, what passion are you bringing to this? I mean, they still want to see, yes, you need to have good scores, you need to be smart, you need to be dedicated and disciplined, but they want to know what's going to carry you on because people are making investments in you too,
Yep.
they're just like yourself. I mean, they want to see what passion, what love, what joy you're going to have in your career, because if you give into the career, it's going to give so much more back to you. So I think it was probably the easiest thing to talk about, number one. So, it was my passion. I could display my passion through my ISL experiences, and people really loved hearing about it.
One of my many hickeyisms is passion trumps everything. I'm a firm believer that if you've got passion, you can get to anywhere and do anything you want to do. I mean, my passion drove me to climb the highest mountains in the world. My passion drove me to do quite a lot of things. And it sounds like you've got that same passion, and people feel that passion. And Katie, I want to ask you, on my last podcast, one of the students brought up her favorite books in healthcare. I'm catching you off guard on this, but she recommended a few books. Is there anything, I mean, I didn't prepare you for this at all. Are there any healthcare focused books that you would recommend for people to read? I know in my syllabus, I always put books that I recommended. I don't know if the students ever read them or not, but is there anything that you've read in years past that you might recommend? And if you have to look it up, that's okay.
But yes, and actually, I feel like I just should take the computer to my library. There are a couple. I actually think Dr. Fauci's book is excellent for those who can get through biographies, autobiographies, nonfiction. It's an excellent, just foray into a brilliant mind and his really prolific career, starting off in HIV research. I mean, he was on the ground in HIV research in the 80s. So it's really a cool story. And then obviously ending in COVID.
Mhm.
So that's, I think that's a really important for anybody who maybe worked through COVID like myself to go back and kind of see what was going on, while you were in the trenches. And so I definitely recommend Dr. Fauci's book. For anybody who is interested in the socioeconomic side, the medical apartheid book is really, really excellent and talks about healthcare inequities in this country. There's a book by I think she's an ICU physician called In Shock. She actually had a postpartum hemorrhage, so it talks about her experience as a patient in the ICU after her delivery and the trauma behind what happened to her. And I think it's very poignant for OBGYNs, obviously, but it's more than that for all people being able to see both sides. You know, she was a patient, a very sick patient, when she was also a physician herself. So those are a couple really good ones. I'm sure people have said when breath becomes air, that's always a
Oh,
goodie.
that's one of my favorites. That was in
But
my syllabus.
yeah, yeah, but yeah, I mean, again, it's if people don't vibe with autobiographies, but Dr. Fauci's book is excellent.
Well, that's great. Well, I wrote down all three, and I'll be sure to put them in the notes for the podcast. And I love that you share the books. One thing we do in the service learning medical mission trips is we do reflections. We, as you remember, we encourage the students to write in a diary, and we will go around and ask, what did you experience? You have them right there. Oh my God. I know this is going to be an audio podcast, but Katie just showed me she's got her diary still from the trips. So for those that don't know, I always encouraged students to write in a diary and to reflect, because at the young age of 18, 19, and 20, some of the experiences they're having are the first time experiences with sorrow, and how did they grapple with that, and my wonderful leaders like Katie would help the students, being almost only 1 year older than most of the students, to deal with those emotions. And that's wonderful that you still have your books. You can look back on them. Can you recall anything of journaling or reflections, or is there anything you want to share to that?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely brought him out last night because I was like, I just kind of want to be back in that space and kind of see where I was. It was very helpful doing a little bit of reflection last night before preparing for this. But, we were all very, very like romantic, very
Mhm.
poetic about how we felt about being like in nascent healthcare. And yes, there's a little bit of idealism in there, a lot of idealism in there, but it's just kind of nice to go back to how that was in that time for all of us. And, I was very, very thorough. I think you gave me an A on my diary. So, I mean, I would write down the food we had for meals. I had diagrams on techniques of suturing and like all kinds of stuff. I have some interesting tidbits about, I think, orientation lessons on pregnant physiology. So good for me. But a lot of it is just like kind of the end of the day thoughts about what I saw, what I felt, the people that I connected with. A lot about the ISL team in my diary from Nicaragua, because I was working so much more with the actual team members than just being one of the students. So you know Carla, I don't know if you remember Carla, but Carla is all over my journal from Nicaragua. She and I were good buddies. At that time, she was a very interesting, very intelligent person. I enjoyed just getting to know her. But, I comment on everything: food, sights,
Mhm.
smells, all this stuff about what we were doing during the day, all of the cultural stuff that we did, the snorkeling and the Mayan ruins and all the kind of cultural experiences that we got too. I mean, I have a lot of really nice reflections in there. So it was
Well,
lovely
for
to
the
go back.
listeners, I have a smile from ear to ear with Katie sharing that information. You made my day pulling out those diaries, by the way. That was icing on the cake. I mean, it's so nice to reconnect with you, but then to see that you've got those treasures with you, that's just huge. I didn't do diaries on the trips. I mean, I orchestrated everybody doing the reflections, but similar to you, what I've got right near my desk here is a huge bag of thank you letters from students that remind me of how we make such a big difference on everybody else in our daily activities. So I feel privileged to have had you as a student, and honored to see where you're at in life right now. And I know that there's a little bit of me and you, in that you, in your own way, are mentoring other people and helping them to see what is best for them in life. And most importantly, you're creating such positive outcomes for your patients and their families. I mean, we always have to consider families too. And all of that is because of that love you have for healthcare, that passion you have that continues from when you were 18 and wet behind the ears and until here you are now in a thriving practice. So we're very privileged to have you as a healthcare provider, and I'm just so excited to see how you've done now in life, and can't even imagine what the future is going to hold for you. Is there any last words you want to share with us, Katie, before we sign off?
Well, thank you for inviting me to have this opportunity. I mean, it was always about giving back, and I know you instilled that in all of us. And I definitely encourage anybody who's interested in taking up on this opportunity to get out there and help others and be in a culture that's not your own. And thank you for everything that you've done for me. I mean, you really helped kickstart a really wonderful, very fulfilling career. And I look forward to hopefully being able to do some of those experiences again now as an attending.
Well, thanks. That's fantastic. Again, so excited, Katie, that we're able to reconnect. Thank you for your time today. I know you're busy and you were able to carve out a little time for me. I'm sure some of our listeners will be very excited about seeing how they can try to emulate and replicate what you've done. I appreciate that. I want to sincerely thank our guest, Katie, for her willingness to join us today on the International Service Learning Experiential Medical Education podcast. But most importantly, I want to thank Katie for the passion that she has shared with us specific to her journey in healthcare. As a practicing OBGYN, Katie has already touched many lives, and as a culturally competent Spanish-speaking MD, she will no doubt be able to create even more positive patient outcomes in underserved populations.